Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, fellow history lovers. Welcome so much to Sunday Night History Chat. My name is Michael C. Hardy. You are hanging out in my library for the next few minutes, and I am so glad that you have chosen to spend a few minutes with me, whether you watch it live on Sunday nights, as we are live right now, or if you catch me later in the week. Thank you so much for just being here and continuing to share history and talk and chat and all of those great things. I have got a fantastic story for you this evening. We will get there here in the next few minutes. Uh, I will be in Raleigh, North Carolina this Thursday evening speaking, and I will be at the old Ashe County Courthouse, which is the Ashe County Museum of History, this Saturday at 1 o'clock speaking. So I encourage you, if you're out and about, come on out and join the conversation in person. That's, that's just part of it, is getting out and sharing that history and learning and doing other things. I don't know what other things we'll be doing, but just sharing that history together. And then I think that's so. I will be in Raleigh speaking to the UDC this Tuesday night. I will be at the Ashe County Museum of History talking World War II history this Saturday, and then the last Saturday of the month I will be at the Hickory Aviation Museum. So lots of different time periods and things that we can talk about and discuss. Little aviation project update. I am so close to actually having a complete manuscript, maybe about 3.5 paragraphs. So I'm sure you will get an announcement here very soon saying, if you follow me on Facebook, saying that, hey, we have a working manuscript at that point in time. So I really look forward to moving on from that project. It's been fun. I've learned a lot of things, but it's been a lot of fun. If you're listening tonight, drop me a comment. Tell me where you're dropping from, and I love to see those and love to see how far spread out we are, whether it be from Flagstaff, Arizona, or Knoxville, Tennessee, or Winchester, Virginia, or even upstairs. Isabella sometimes sits over there and tunes in, but she is upstairs right now hanging out. So tonight, I've been reading this book for review for Emerging Civil War called The Confederate Navy Medical Corps. And it's been a fascinating book. It's not a page turner. Some of it is very detailed organizational type stuff, but spread throughout it are all kinds of little stories. And I want to vaguely say that I remember this coming up at some point in the past, but where I'm going to share parts of that with you tonight. Um, hey, there's our friend Billy Bubba checking in from Gastonia, West Gastonia, Gaston County. I almost thought I was going to have to work next Sunday night, but I don't think I am. So we're going to talk tonight, and you'll once again be able to check this out tomorrow on the Looking for the Confederate War blog. It will drop at 9 o'clock in the morning, already set up and ready to run. But this is titled Piracy, Smuggled Weapons, A Master of Disguise, The Capture of the St. Nicholas. I don't know if any of you are familiar with this story, but it's pretty fascinating stuff. Just fascinating stuff. So the very first part of the war is fairly well documented. You know, we have the attack on Fort Sumter. Lincoln is trying to resupply the federal garrison there, and the Confederates in South Carolina open fire. We've got the U.S. occupation of Arlington Heights there, where the George Washington Parker Custis Parker I forgot now where his house is. We all know it is Arlington, Robert E. Lee's home, but it's a much older house than Lee's association with it. We've got the Battle of Big Bethel in June of 1861. Those are all pretty well-known stories. Lesser known is this strange story of one of the first Confederate naval victories. And if you've ever heard this story, just pop up, hey, I've heard this story before. It's just Michael not being able to remember things. There's a man by the name of George N. Hollis, and he is a United States naval officer. Need more research on Hollis, but he's a United States naval officer who resigns his commission. And he comes up with this idea while he is in Baltimore that he is going to steal this supply ship, steamer ship that's known as St. Nicholas. And his idea was, quote, to man her with volunteers and then take the Pawnee, which is another U.S. naval vessel that's kind of blockading part of the Potomac River. His was a bold and daring plan. But the Maryland side of the Potomac River swarmed with Federal soldiers. So after Hollis has this idea, but figures out he cannot do it from Baltimore, he goes further afield. Now, the St. Nicholas was a packet boat that ran regularly between Baltimore and Washington, D.C. It had other stops, Alexandria, Georgetown, Point Lookout. Yes, that Point Lookout. So Hollis, after he resigns his commission, he goes to Richmond, Virginia, and gains a commission in the Confederate States Navy. He wants to go to Secretary of the Navy Mallory with this idea, but he's told that Mallory will just shoot it down right then and there. But somebody says that if you go to Governor Letcher, Letcher will approve the idea. And Hollis goes to Letcher, and Letcher actually gives him a bank draft for $1,000 to go purchase firearms. So Hollis and this man by the name of Colonel Thomas of Maryland, whose alias is Zarvona. Maybe that's his first name, real first name, but I have it in my notes that his alias is Zarvona. It's Zarvona, Colonel Thomas, who proceeds on to Baltimore and maybe Philadelphia to procure weapons and maybe a few more men. Hollis tells Thomas to return to Point Lookout on the St. Nicholas. So that's the St. Nicholas leaves Baltimore, goes to D.C., goes on down the Potomac River, turns around and sails back up, and that's its route that it does all the time. And once the war starts, it stops servicing the Virginia side of the Potomac River. Is just sailing along the Maryland side of the Potomac River. So at some point, a couple of days later, the St. Nicholas is returning, heading for a regular stop there on the at Point Lookout. When it gets to Point Lookout, it's in the middle of the night. Hollis and his band boarded the vessel about midnight, where he found, quote, Colonel Thomas dressed as a woman to avoid suspicion, as he had large trunks, such as a milliner uses. These large trunks contained arms and ammunition. Just a few minutes after leaving the wharf, Hollis gives the signal. The trunks are opened and members of the party are armed, with Hollis taking a Sharps rifle and a pair of pistols. He ran to the wheelhouse and put his hands on the captain's shoulder, capturing the vessel. Hollis orders the captain to sail the St. Nicholas to the Cono River on the Virginia side of the Potomac. He was joined by a small body of Confederate soldiers under a Captain Lewis. A couple of my sources said some of these soldiers were from Tennessee. The passengers were landed and most made their way home. A lot of the passengers on the St. Nicholas were actually Virginians who were returning south. Interestingly, there was a group of ladies on board the St. Nicholas who, quote, amused themselves by making Confederate flags out of Yankee flags that Hollis had captured. end quote. Hollis determined that the Pawnee was out of his reach. Instead, he sailed out into the Chesapeake Bay toward Fredericksburg. He soon spotted the brig, the Monticello, with a load of coffee from Rio. Hollis captured the brig without firing a shot. He moved a crew under Lieutenant Robert D. Minor and sent the load of coffee to Fredericksburg. An hour later, Hollis and the St. Nicholas captures a schooner coming from Baltimore and bound for Washington, D.C. with a load of ice. Once again, Hollis places a prize crew aboard the vessel and sends it on to Fredericksburg. On board this unnamed ship, Hollis found a, quote, splendid, and I'm not quite sure what this means, but he found, quote, a splendid flag of a 74. I'm not sure if that's the size or whatever, but the flag had been borrowed from a U.S. Navy yard for Stephen Douglas's funeral. United States Senator Stephen Douglas, who ran against Lincoln in the 1860 election. They take that flag, a very large flag, and make, quote, a goodly number of secession flags out of this large U.S. flag. Hollis then captures another unnamed vessel coming from Baltimore and heading to Boston. This one was loaded with coal, which Hollis used to replenish the St. Nicholas's store. At that point, Hollis, afraid that word had gotten out and that Federal gunboats were looking for him, sailed the St. Nicholas to Fredericksburg. The Confederate government purchases the St. Nicholas for, quote, about $45,000, end quote, and then turns it into a gunboat. Piracy on the Chesapeake, read a headline in the Baltimore Sun on July 2nd, 1861. The St. Nicholas was seen leaving Point Lookout under great speed for the Virginia shore. There's no doubt but that she was taken forcibly by a group of parties who came as passengers in her from Baltimore, end quote. By that evening, the Baltimore Sun was able to report that it was Hollis who had captured the St. Nicholas. After unloading passengers and taking on board soldiers, the newspaper wrote, Hollis proceeded to capture 3 other vessels. So part of me says that's really amazing that this takes place about June 28th, 1861, and by July 2nd, 1861, this is appearing in newspapers that it is Hollis and that he has captured 3 other vessels. The news itself quickly makes the rounds. New York Daily Herald reported, quote, the rebels have succeeded by a coup de main in seizing and carrying off a Baltimore steamer. Another newspaper, the New York Times, reads, the seizure of the steamer St. Nicholas from this port, they're obviously talking about Baltimore, proved to have been a bold, piratical expedition. The Richmond Dispatch considered the affair a brilliant achievement. The New Bern Daily Progress labeled it a daring exploit. And then we find another account. This was published in 1910 in the Evening Sun in Baltimore. And it tells the story of George W. Watts, who was an old man. He was a Confederate, and then after the war, he became a painter. But he is listed as the last survivor of Colonel Zarvonos Thomas's band. The article states, Watts stated that Thomas had about 16 men with him that evening. After boarding the vessel in Baltimore, Watts could not find the colonel. But he did notice, quote, a mighty pretty young woman, stylishly dressed, flirting outrageously with some of the officers. She talked with a strong French accent. That young woman behaved so scandalously that all the other women on the boat were in a terrible state over it, end quote. Later, Watts was summoned below deck. On entering the cabin, he saw his comrades gathered around that frisky French lady. Then Watts recognized the eyes of the lady as belonging to Colonel Thomas. Thomas then shed his bonnet, wig, and dress and stepped forth in a brilliant new Zouave uniform. In a jiffy, the French lady's three big trunks were dragged out and opened. One was filled with cutlasses, another with Colt revolvers, and the third with carbines. Watts and the others armed themselves, then proceeded to take possession of the St. Nicholas. According to Watts, the Pawnee was no longer in position guarding the river south of Washington, but had moved closer to the city, escorting a dead naval officer to the capital. The story of the capture of the St. Nicholas is so outlandish that it almost seems like an episode or a work of fiction. I was, when Elizabeth and I were going over this earlier, we were thinking of Artemis Gordon on the Wild Wild West show back in the 70s, 60s, and 70s. Yet apparently this story really did happen, and the history of this strange event, though less spectacular than a battle, needs to be told with those along with Fort Sumter and Big Bethel Church, and then later on the Battle of First Manassas. Absolutely amazing story. So I am curious how many of you have ever heard the story of the capture of the St. Nicholas? Drop me a comment in the box. Yes or no. We've heard or never heard of the capture of the St. Nicholas. There's our friend TJ. Hope things are going well over in East Tennessee. Yeah, capture of St. Nicholas. Our friend David says it's new to him. Oh, it was. I think it's almost new to me too. It's like I said, we were picturing Artemis Gordon from Wild Wild West and all of the costumes that they used to have in that show. I guess this just goes to show how fun history can be, and all of these interesting things. Need to do more research on a lot of these people that I mentioned. Hollis is a person that, I'm looking in the standard works on Confederate naval forces, and I don't see him pop up really very much. The Colonel Thomas, Watts does say, and this is not included in my post for tomorrow, but Watts does say that Thomas was captured at another event not long after this and spent about 2 years in prison before he was released. And after he was released, Watts saw him and said that he was a shell of his former self and died not long thereafter. So we need to research him out as well. But that goes beyond our discussion for this evening. History has so many little twists and turns that it is absolutely amazing what we can find out there and the little stories we've never known. So just a lot of stuff out there to find. Hollis was a U.S. Navy captain and base commander when he captured the St. Nick. Hollis had a commission in the Confederate Navy for all of like 3 days when he did this. He was obviously a go-getter. I did find him, I think, at the James River Squadron for a while. I think I found him in New Orleans for a while, but that's a whole different post and discussion at some point in the future. It is hard to do research on Confederate naval figures. The Confederate Navy Medical Corps book that I've just finished reading. A lot of those records were destroyed at the end of the war, either in Richmond. Some of them were transported to Charlotte where they were destroyed. We think they were destroyed. Maybe they're still in someone's attic in Mecklenburg County or down in York or Rock Hill, South Carolina. That would be a tremendous thing to find. But just an amazing story. And I saw a couple of you say that you had never heard of that before. Just an amazing story.
More than, of course, Artemis Gordon had heard of that.
Yes, just fascinating stuff. And there is, I actually was digging around and I found this image that appeared in Harper's Weekly on July 27th, 1861. And the can we make it bigger? Yes, we can. Look at that technology right there. The French lady and brother Jonathan. The French lady picks in the pocket of his model steamer, and then she makes off with it to the sacred soil. And that's a whole nother conversation. Is artwork propaganda in that time period? But here this somewhat beautiful French lady is picking this guy's pocket, and then she runs away. She's got a goatee and a hawk-billed nose, and just just fascinating stuff. Really fascinating. So that will be in the post as well tomorrow. Um, so that's it for tonight. If you got any questions or anything you want to talk about, please drop a comment in the box, and we'll see where we can go. As I said, I'll be in Raleigh on Thursday night. I may be in the other part of the state for a couple of days, bumping around, researching, taking pictures. And then I will be at the Ashe County Courthouse. The time traveling Hardys will be at the Ashe County Courthouse on Saturday. I think from 10 to 3, and then I'm speaking at 1 o'clock. So please come on out if you live in this area and hang out with us and share history, because that's what's about. And yeah, maybe it was Uncle Sam who was getting his pocket picked. I'm not so sure about that. I couldn't find any article in that issue of Harper's Weekly, or that dealt with that. But maybe I just missed it. But they did have those two pictures, and they're referring to this event. So pretty cool stuff. If you've got any comments or anything you want to talk about, drop it in the box. I'll hang out for a few more minutes. Then we're going to try and get this book review done for Emerging Civil War. So when we get up tomorrow morning, we can get back on that aviation project and hammer away at it. And maybe I'll be able to post tomorrow evening and say, hey, we got an entire working manuscript. If you're going to be around Friday night, check out David Pope and Friends of Douglas Southall Freeman talking about old Jew Burley goes to Washington. Alas, I'll be at the park Friday night, but it's where I am most Friday and Saturday nights. Yeah. All right. Any other comments? Kind of short this evening, but I thought y'all would enjoy that post. And once again, you can check it out on the blog, looking for the Confederate War tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock. Richard Hodges says that he visited Big Creek Gap yesterday and saw some 58th fellas. You were probably over there near the DeLapp Family Cemetery there in Campbell County, Tennessee. I've been over there several times, spoke at the dedication of that, many of those monuments, gravestones over there. Fascinating little piece of history there in Campbell County, Tennessee. So, there are 58th members. Of course, the 58th North Carolina was from Western North Carolina, Ashe County, Wilkes County, Watauga, Avery, but it didn't exist at that time. Mitchell, Yancey, Caldwell, and there are folks buried in that cemetery from all over. We've often speculated why so many of them died, just from the 58th and from the other Confederate regiments around there. And maybe there was something bad in the water. I mean, like, there's a lot of coal mining in that area, and maybe the water was just bad. And I know the water a lot of times is bad, but it really hit the Confederate soldier station there protecting those gaps from Cumberland Gap down to Big Creek Gap, La Follette, Jackson, those areas, it hit them really bad. Often wondered why. All right, folks, I think that's going to do it for me this evening. Thank you so much for joining me here on Sunday Night History Chat, joining me in my library. I hope things are well wherever it is that you are and that you're staying cool because it's kind of warm. Of course, it is summer, but I hope everything's going well with each of you. Thank you for joining me here, and I hope everyone has a great week. Continue to get out, research, share your love of history, no matter what time period, and just be willing to have those conversations. Y'all have a great week, and God bless.